Welcome back to episode 4 of Trade Talks. I'm joined today once again by our CEO and Executive Director here at WUSATA, Jason Ferniho. And we're here to discuss the 2026 Feeding the Economy report that was released about a month ago. This report was the 10th annual Feeding the Economy report, and it dives deep into the economic impact of the food and agricultural industry across the full supply chain. This report is sponsored by 35 national food industry groups, including our partners at NASDA, or the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture. And it provides award winning data that's used by government officials, the media, and industry leaders to share the importance of the American food and ag industry to our country's economy. Jason, I know you reviewed this report right when it came out, so I'm looking forward to hearing your insights on it. Starting off at a high level, what does the Feeding the Economy report tell us about the role of food and agriculture in the U.S. economy?
Well, good morning, Tiffany. It's good to be here with you again. As I look at this report, I think what it tells us is just how important agriculture and the food industries are to the U.S. economy and therefore the world. It takes a very, very deep dive into a lot of economic factors as they go through the report, but ultimately it just shows that this without agriculture and the food economies in the US, we would be in a very different place economically, probably, than we are today.
Absolutely. As I mentioned, this is the 10th annual report that's been released. Was there anything in this year's report that surprised you?
I don't know that anything surprised me. It's always good to see the numbers, and I guess in a way, I'm taken aback by the numbers. Our economy in the United States is so strong and has been for a long period of time. But when you look at the numbers and see the trillions of dollars that the food and ag industries put into our economy, it's very impressive, and it just kind of warms your heart to see what we're able to contribute in our industries.
Yeah, definitely agree. I think seeing these huge numbers really makes me proud to be a part of that industry.
Absolutely.
So we'll get into some of these numbers specifically. The report states that the food and ag sector is responsible for nearly 49 million jobs in our country, about 1 in 5 jobs in the US. Why do you think that's often overlooked by maybe the average American?
Ultimately, it boils down to, let me back into that number. 4 out of the 5 jobs are not. So, I think oftentimes that just as human nature, when we're not involved in something, we maybe kinda don't look into it as deeply as maybe we should. We don't really take the time to understand how it impacts us. Even though everybody eats every day, in this country, it is important to everybody, but I think it's just the fact that we are a minority in the country in our industries, but a powerful one. So I think it's just kind of that it's not, it's out of sight, out of mind. People have food on their table. They have easy access to the things that these industries provide in this country. And so sometimes I think that's maybe why it gets overlooked. But it's really hard to overlook it when you're diving into the numbers that we were just talking about.
Yeah.
48 million plus jobs and trillions of dollars that is being added into the economy.
On a similar note, the report discusses how agriculture's impact extends beyond the farm. What are some of the most surprising parts of the supply chain that people might not think about?
Ultimately, people think of, I guess, just food, but if you think of the impacts from the agriculture sectors that come into all of our everyday products, I mean, anything from cleaning products to our automobiles to medicines, I think, those are things that people really don't think about coming from agriculture, and yet, it is just driven by it. Our clothing in, a variety of ways comes from these industries, whether you're talking about wool or cotton or any other variety of things that come from there. So I really think that that is one of the things that kind of we were talking about being overlooked. You have, when people do think about agriculture, they think about food. They don't think about those types of things that are supplied by this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in 4 H, and one of the projects we did when we went to a local school to talk about 4 H and agriculture in our area was talking about byproducts of livestock. And
Mhm.
that was always so interesting to me hearing about how parts of the electrical industry and car manufacturing are all coming from the livestock industry. It's just so interesting how broad our industry spans when you look at all of those pieces. So, getting into the numbers a bit further, according to the report, the U.S. food and ag industry generates $3 trillion in wages and $1.3 trillion in taxes. So, obviously, we're talking huge contributions to the economy here. How does this impact show up in local communities, especially in more rural areas?
Well, just in general, on the things like taxes and wages, obviously, if it's providing good jobs, that is vital for any part of the country, but certainly in rural towns, rural economies, it's vital to be able to have those wages that are being pumped into local economies just on a variety of levels. When you have agriculture that is a strong support system for many of the towns throughout the country, certainly in our region in the West, it is noticeable for those wages that come in. But if they weren't there, it would be even more noticeable.
The report also highlights strong export activity, which is obviously near and dear to our hearts, including $177 billion in exports coming from the country's food and ag industry. What does this say about the global competitiveness of the U.S. food and agriculture industry?
I think, it shows a lot of things, but probably most importantly, the quality that comes from the United States when we're talking about food and ag products, is second to none in the world. People seek out our products from this country because of those things, the safety factors, the quality factors, and they know that there's going to be a very consistent supply coming from this country, and so that shows up in those numbers when you start talking about the billions of dollars in export.
The Feeding the Economy report breaks out data by state. I imagine this is really helpful to you as you're looking at how our region impacts the US economy as a whole. Can you tell me a little bit about how you plan to utilize the information from this report to strengthen the work that WUSATA does and what you think other industry stakeholders can take away from the report as they plan for the future?
Now, from the WUSATA standpoint, as we look at this report, the total output that is contributed by the WUSATA states, the Western states, is about $2.5 trillion to the economy. And I think when you look at those numbers and you're able to visit with people throughout the country, it gives us the opportunity to really show a focus on how important these industries are, whether I'm talking to groups here in the United States and within the Western US to for them to help them understand the impact of our industries and how beneficial they are to everything around us, especially with people that maybe are not as familiar. But then as you're looking out into the exports that we deal in, help our companies get out there. I think when you can show these kind of numbers, it really gives credence to the story of how valuable our products are, both from as we just mentioned, a safety standpoint, from a value standpoint, the quality that is there. These numbers really start backing that up. So it makes it easier to tell the story for that. And I think, as far as other groups that would be looking at this report and utilizing it, I think a very similar thing. We can take a lot of pride in what this report shows us about the United States ag sector and the food sector. And I think that if you can utilize these numbers to just back up the stories that you're telling. A lot of times when we are working, in other countries, for instance, a lot of times they want to hear a story. They want to hear the story of the food. They want to know the people that they're doing business with. And those are very important things, getting to know people on a relationship level. But when you can then come in and enhance those conversations and those relationships with numbers like this report shows, it just helps grow the brand. And that doesn't matter if it is with WUSATA or if it is with a commodity specific or from one of the other SRTGs or from NASA. This is just great information to be able to share with people out there.
Absolutely. I think this is really insightful data to share with the world as we're going out there to promote Western US agriculture and US agriculture as a whole. So, I wanted to extend a big thank you to all the organizations who sponsor this report every year. It really does provide truly impactful data to tell those stories of our producers across the country. And we'll provide a link for the Feeding the Economy website where our viewers can go and download the full report if they're interested in diving into the details. But, Jason, thank you so much for joining me today. It's always great to hear your insights.
Thank you, Tiffany. It's a joy to be here.